Your Chief of Police and PIO, Gary Woodruff. He's from the Lawrence Police Department in Indiana. Welcome to the show, Gary.
Hey, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Gary, let's talk basics. How long were you at the Lawrence Police Department?
So I started my career in in the U.S. Army Military Police in the Criminal Investigations Division and served 3 years there. Then from 86 to 2000, I served with an agency called the Frankfort Police Department, which is still here in Indiana, a couple counties north of Indianapolis, with the Frankfort Police Department. I was a legacy hire there. My dad served on 20 years on that department and was a two-term chief and then went on to be a two-term mayor there from 92 to 2000. So I had the pleasure of being along with some of his career there. And then in 2000, transferred to Lawrence and was with the Lawrence Police Department since from 2020 to where I retired in January of 20 after 40 years of total law enforcement service.
Very good. All right. So how long were you the PIO as well there?
Yeah, so I served as PIO. I was trained initially as a public information officer in 1990 and started serving as the Frankfort PD PIO in 93. And when I transferred to Lawrence, continued that service really throughout my tenure there at Lawrence, other than the initial initial training time there at Lawrence and orientation. But then and continued with serving as a PIO and was our media relations chief really since 20 probably, but served continuously as a PIO for 30 plus years since 1990.
All right, so let's talk about location and stuff. Where is Lawrence PD located in Indiana for our listeners? So we have a geographical location. What is the sworn manpower? And then the civilian professional staff. How many of each?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lawrence, Indiana is situated within Marion County / Indianapolis, right in the heart of the state of Indiana. Indianapolis is obviously a major metropolitan area, and Indianapolis has a unique government system called Unigov, where the city and county services are all combined. And then within the county, there are several excluded municipalities from Unigov. In other words, we have our own political structure. Lawrence is the largest of those. Daytime population, just a little bit over 50,000, 52, 53,000 probably. And then, of course, with working population there, we're up in the 65, 70,000 range probably. And it's a thriving community, very diverse, home of former Fort Benjamin Harrison U.S. Army base, and still home to the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, which is the largest building second largest building in DOD behind the Pentagon, and then the third largest building in the entire country. So it's a huge, sprawling campus with several thousand people working there on a daily basis. And as far as our department is concerned, we have 100 people under the roof of the Lawrence Police Department. That includes 65 full-time sworn members. We have about 30 or so reserve officers. And for agencies that don't enjoy the privilege of having reserve officers on their department, these are people who basically volunteer for free to serve as police officers. They're fully trained. Many of them have attended the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy, and they're just such a value added that we can leverage as a department, and they bring a tremendous value to us. And then we have our own communication center as well, 15 telecommunicators there. It's of critical importance that we maintain our own communication center. We're the backup site for the Indianapolis / Marion County Communication Center. And then we have several civilian support personnel, front office staff, crime watch coordinator. We have a full-time staff chaplain, which is kind of unique for a department our size. And they focus on several duties that, we're really big on community outreach, but we're also well known as being a pretty aggressive police department. We like to, we finally call ourselves Law Town in Lawrence. So, we enjoy terrific community support. People who choose to live in Lawrence within Marion County, they're kind of independent. They like living out in Lawrence. They like having a police department that, we have the best of both worlds, we like to call it. We have still the small town feel where everybody kind of knows everybody, but yet we have the urban activity that you would have in a major metropolitan area.
Okay, so your former agency has a distinction of being one of 50 agencies across the United States that was featured on the AE documentary show Live PD. Let's talk about how that came to be.
Yeah, what a terrific experience that was. And so the folks from Live PD connected with us, and one of the great takeaways, I think, from that initial connection is the value of building and maintaining relationships. And we all know the importance of that, but this event certainly illustrates that. So the producers of Live PD, they were well established into their run as the most popular television show on cable on Friday and Saturday nights. The only more popular TV shows that were on cable, period, were sporting events. So IPD was a massive success with the viewing public, 2 million viewers every Friday and Saturday night. And for people who aren't familiar, this is a TV show on A&E. It was a live documentary where camera crews, journalists, would ride along with police agencies across the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast, Midwest, South, Southwest, Northwest, Northeast, Greater Northwest. I mean, with 8 police departments across the country, and they would just tune in as to what might be going on in a particular agency. So the producers wanted to come to Indianapolis. They wanted to come to this area, to the Midwest. They initially approached our friends at the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. Understandable. They're a huge agency. And they were politely declined. And so one of the producers used to work for the Fox affiliate, or knew folks here at the Fox affiliate here in Indianapolis. So they connected with them, and they're like, hey, we want to come to Indy. We don't know, IMPD turned us down. We're thinking Speedway PD, which is another one of the excluded municipalities. A lot of people think of our friends at Speedway because of the Indianapolis 500 that runs every May. So the folks at the local Fox affiliate, were like, Speedway's pretty slow most of the time, other than the month of May. You need to reach out to Lawrence PD. They're very media friendly, and here's a contact, and they're a very busy agency. So they connected with us. They sent out a supervising producer to meet with us, and we had a sit-down face-to-face meeting with them. Just so happens the supervising producer they sent out was a North Central High School graduate right here in Indianapolis. Her parents still live here in Indy. She's very familiar with the area, and the relationship was solidly formed from there. So we went on the show in 2018 and had a 98-episode run every Friday and Saturday night. The viewers of Live PD got to do a ride-along with our officers and 7 other agencies from across the entire country. Well, that's how it came to be.
Right. So I just want to point out to the listeners, there were 200 episodes of Live PD. You guys accounted for 98% of them, or 98 episodes, which is over 30% of what they put out. That is absolutely amazing. So my question is how did that attention from the show impact your agency, if it did at all?
Yeah, it did. But I would say the footprint of the production of the show was minimal. It was just like any other media ride-along, really. And there were several things about the show. It is a true documentary. And I can tell you this, it was truly live. There was about a 15-minute delay on what the viewers saw. And the reason for that, A, was a cuss track. You don't want to hear F-bombs on live national television if you can avoid it. And then the other part of that, too, was if, say, there was a crash that could have resulted in fatality. You would hate for somebody's loved one to learn that their loved one had been involved in a crash like that on live national television before they had an opportunity to hear it from us directly, from law enforcement or public safety directly. So there was a bit of a delay on it, but otherwise it was live. The producers went to each of the agencies and cut to, went to the camera crews with them depending on activity. And we were a very, very busy agency. So, in the genesis of that whole thing, I think it's important to share this. There's a lot of discussion among our leadership, especially with our mayor, our chief, some of the other community leaders, as far as, is it going to put Lawrence in a bad light? Is it going to make us look bad? And our response to that across the board, from the mayor to the chief to me as the media person, was, what's happening is what's happening. We're busy. Everybody knows that. So the activities that are occurring, they're occurring whether there's a national TV, a documentary crew with us or not. What the show is going to depict is the magnificent response that our officers had on a daily and nightly basis. We have a terrific department, and we had full confidence in the capabilities of our officers and their responses on the incidents that did occur. And we had a terrific 98-episode run, and we were the second longest running agency on that show before it was canceled, by A&E, and it was a extremely popular. And the impact on our agency was, I would say, across the board positive. You always have the critics, and that's okay. Sometimes that's how you learn and grow, and some of that can provide opportunity for that. But a large majority, 98, 99%, overwhelming positive, and especially within our own community. And the new show now is called On Patrol Live. It's on a different network, but it's being produced by the same people. And our agency had a standing invitation, and still does have a standing invitation, to be on that show. Our staffing levels right now don't allow for that to occur, but you have a lot of new people. And imagine being in your first year as a police officer, and you have a national TV crew on the incident that you're on. Could make for some considerable nervousness on the part of a brand new police officer. So,
Gary, a question. So those that may not understand it, and what happened here is, when A&E canceled the show, what was the pressure that they were experiencing? Because that was right in the middle of the pandemic, essentially, correct?
Yeah, it was the pandemic, but we worked through that. Frankly, it was during the height of the aftermath of the George Floyd incident and the national anti-police rhetoric that was occurring. And let's be clear, any of us that have ethics and integrity in law enforcement, clearly what happened in the George Floyd incident, that we can't do that. And there's been accountability there, and a lot of police departments went through a learning process in the aftermath of that, including ours. And so we took opportunity there where it existed to learn, to grow, to do better as a profession and as an agency. So let's be clear about that. But we're told, so this is just my opinion, we're told that A&E fought the good fight. A&E is owned by Disney. We're told that it was Disney executives that decided to cancel Live PD at the height of its popularity as a response to some of the protest and some of the anti-police sentiment that was prevalent throughout the country during that time period.
And I'll
But
tell you,
the producers brought the show back a period later on a different network, albeit. But our body of work while we were on Live PD and while that show ran, it truly was a view of law enforcement in America. And that's exactly what the producers of the show wanted to present, was the truth of what's happening, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between.
right.
And to provide perspective on how policing works in America. And I believe they hit a home run, and I believe they still are.
And just, what a poor perspective on Disney's point of view. If they would have said, okay, Live PD, here's what we want. We want to now see where these departments are changing things and where they're making improvements and how they're encountering the public out there now. Could you imagine the amount of positive PR that Disney would have gotten out of that show if they would have shown what these agencies were going through and experiencing, good, bad, or ugly, and then the changes that they were putting together for their people and for the community as a whole? I mean, what a great opportunity to center it, but they caved to pressure and I'm sure advertisers as well.
Yeah, obviously we weren't in the room when the Disney folks were going through their decision-making process. But yeah, what an amazing opportunity and a platform that show provided to tell just that, to tell that story and the continuing story of how policing works in America. But and I think your points are well made. The also relevant is the producers of that show, regrouped, reconfigured, found another network, and are continuing on. And they rode along with our friends at Beech Grove Police Department right here in Marion County. We kind of made that link, introduced the production team to our friends at Beech Grove Police, and so they had about 6 months or so on the new show and had a great experience there, I'm told, as well. And now they moved on to other agencies, but we have a standing in the current chief and the current leadership there at Lawrence. They can always reconsider. Right. You got to have buy-in, and maybe this is a segue. Got to have buy-in from your rank and file, from your officers that are out there doing the work every day.
Let's talk about that. How did you do it in the beginning?
Yes, when the leadership agreed that being on the show would be a good thing. If your officers aren't into it, it's not going to work. So we did a series of meet and greets with the production team, and of course there was some concern at first. We had one officer in particular who wound up being a very popular officer on the show, but in the initial stages of it, he was one of those officers that when we'd ask about a media ride along, hey, local media like to do a ride along, anybody interested? He was always one of those guys who was too cool for school. Nah, not interested in doing a media ride along, no thanks. And so he agreed to do it, and I think he kind of liked a couple of the photographers, a couple of the camera crew members. And so after his first ride along with Live PD, he enjoyed it so much he started his own Twitter page. And then a little while later, he started a Twitter page for his dog. Not his police canine, his personal dog. His dog has a Twitter page. Yeah. So it was quite an experience, and it's kind of like one of those things. Once officers see the first couple of officers doing it and having good experiences, they're like, "Hey, I want to do that too. That's cool." And it just kind of built up steam. And of our 65 full-time sworn officers, we didn't have that number then. I think we were around 58, 59 then. We had about 15 or so core officers that enjoyed being on the show, and really it was a good experience for them, good experience for the agency, for the community, and the production team. At Live PD, the producers, behind the scenes, had a positive experience here as well.
Gary, did your department, did Lawrence PD, did they have body cameras or in-car cameras at the time?
We did, yeah. So that's an important point to make also. We were the first agency within Marion County, Indianapolis here to invest in body-worn cameras for our officers. We did that right at the genesis stage of the body-worn camera movement within law enforcement. We felt like it was important. We were not responding to some precipitating event, some derogatory or negative event that required that. We were being proactive with it. And that was the style of our leadership team, our chief, our two deputy chiefs. We were very proactive with technology, with moving our department forward, and investing in body-worn cameras we felt was an important move. And we were the first agency in Marion County to do so. And so our officers kind of helped with the comfort level also, because our officers were already recording ourselves. And of course, in that period, we already knew there were cameras everywhere, so you're on camera. As a matter of fact, a maxim that we would say all the time is act as if you're being recorded all the time, because we usually were. And then when we provided body-worn cameras to our officers, then you're already recording yourself. So it's really no big deal for having a documentary crew riding along with you. And they were really great about interacting with the officers, staying in the background when they needed to, and not being intrusive at all. These are experienced veterans when it comes to media production and documentaries. They've been with other agencies. They've done other work on other shows, and they were tactically sound. That was a really big deal for us and our officers. They needed to be tactically sound, and for instance, not backlighting our officers. And I can tell you this much too: they were in great shape. And we've got some young officers on late shift, like most agencies. Most of the young officers are on middle and late shift, who are obviously great tactical athletes, and they're bailing out on foot pursuits and doing different things that require a lot of physical exertion. And those camera folks, while carrying those cameras, are keeping right up with our officers. And
Gary,
they really did a magnificent job at capturing the action.
Gary, what suggestions would you have for agencies that wanted to invite a news documentary show into their community, whether it's Live PD or 48 Hours or whoever?
Yeah, so I would have that community discussion, be open and transparent about it, and if we want to, we can kind of start talking about that word transparency, that term transparency. I would respectfully submit that this becomes somewhat of an overused term, but that's a different discussion. But have that community discussion. Certainly make sure you have leadership buy-in within your community from your political structure, your mayor, your city council, your public board of works and safety, whatever your political infrastructure might be, and be open with the community also. We were very open about participating on the show. And then most importantly, I think you have to get the input of your officers that are going to be out there in the field doing the job day in and day out. Always listen to the guy or gal on the ground, right? It's a guiding principle that any leader should adhere to. Always listen to the guy or gal on the ground. They have the best knowledge, they have the best tacit knowledge about what's occurring in the field and what they're experiencing. So, getting that buy-in from everybody ahead of time up front and making sure this is something everybody understands and thinks is a good thing, even if there is some concern, understand those concerns, do your best to address them. At some point, I think you have to have the confidence, have the confidence in your officers and your staff that they are going to do the right thing, they're going to perform their duties that we know they do on a day in and day night out basis, night in and night out basis. And it just gave us as department leaders tremendous confidence in considering and ultimately going in and agreeing to participate in a show like a Live PD, On Patrol Live, or any of the other law enforcement documentaries. Also get to know, just building those relationships, getting to know the people. And it was important to us. This was a true documentary. That camera is unblinking, and that if something does occur that is undesirable, then it's going to show that, and there needs to be accountability held also there, and I think that's another important key aspect. Yeah, so the lessons or the takeaways, again, I don't keep going back to it, but investing in relationships, developing, maintaining, investing in those relationships. And, something we embraced a long time ago, and I personally embraced a long time ago, if we don't participate in the telling of our story as American law enforcement, and the ethos, that goes along with that, that story is going to get told for us. And frequently it's going to be told incorrectly, or at a minimum incomplete. And so we need to do better at participating in that. And this was part of it. Having this opportunity to participate in this show was part of that openness, and part of that telling our true story about what our profession is, what our agency is, and the officers that make up our law enforcement agencies across the country. And it was an honor for us to be a small part of that, of the telling of that story. And because frequently it does get told for us, and frequently it's told incorrectly, incomplete, or in a way that is unfavorable. And we all know what the truth is, and what our professional ethos is, the ethics, the integrity, and the desire to truly serve our communities. And so I think if we don't embrace the telling of that story, at least participating in the telling of that story, it's going to get told for us, and it's going to be at best incomplete and frequently incorrect, told incorrectly. Yeah, it's true. Well, there are several. I think, first of all, embracing the true professional public information officer, media relations person within a department, somebody to take ownership of that whole thing and truly embracing that. And I like to think I was one of those people. I'll leave that for others to judge, but I like to think that was very important to me anyways, to take ownership of that from the two agencies that I did have the great fortune of being a part of telling the story. And you need to make it you need to serve a cause greater than yourself. And it's something that I certainly embraced. This is not about me, not about Gary Woodruff. This is about our agency. This is about our profession and truly telling that story in an accurate way. Again, I think embracing the concept that if we don't participate, if we don't take part in the telling of our own story, it's going to get told for us. We've already covered that. But in today's age also of shifting media, when I first started, the main conduit was print, radio, and television media. Now you have all these other platforms, the social media platforms, and the other ways we have of telling our story and reaching a wider audience, reaching a nationwide audience. You think about that. 2 million people every Friday and Saturday night rode along with us, our agency, our officers, and the 8 agencies that were participating in a show like Live PD at the time. I also don't think you can forget, though, that ultimately, especially with smaller agencies, think about it in the state of Indiana, the average size agency is 4 officers. 4 officers is the average size agency in the state of Indiana. So for every Indianapolis, for every Lawrence, for every larger agency, there are a multitude of these smaller agencies, and they can embrace the same concepts just as much as a larger agency can. And having somebody on that agency truly embrace the telling of that story at the grassroots level within your community, and by that I mean getting out there and talking to the community, interacting. The only time that they see law enforcement officers in our community sees us as police officers, especially as agency leaders, it should not be when something has gone awry, when something has gone wrong. We should be very well known in the community, invested in the community that we serve, and working on making those investments on a hourly, minutely, second time frame, making those investments on a consistent, constant basis. I think that's one of the things that kind of separates a smaller agency in particular from our friends at larger agencies. They really have to work pretty hard to make those investments where a smaller agency frequently can invest. They know Gary Woodruff. They know whoever the chief is, the deputy chiefs, the other leadership, and the officers. They see them on a consistent basis, and they get to know them very well. We kind of took that model within an infrastructure like a Live PD and displayed that for the nation to see. And yeah, we opened ourselves up to criticism, and we would get that on occasion. Sometimes there may be some validity to it. Frequently there was not. It wasn't what the officers were doing, it was how they were doing it. I'll give an example if I may. We had one officer who decided to give a break on a traffic stop. The person was found to have a little bit of marijuana in their possession, just a little bit of shake in the bottom of the bag. So the officer decided to give him a break. Well, the officer shook the contents out on the side of the road. We would have preferred the officer put the evidence in the property room, but that's okay. He decided to dump it out on the side of the road. As he did so, he was wearing gloves, of course. So when he took the gloves off, he was going to put the little baggie inside the gloves, take it to his car, and discard the bag. Well, the baggie flew off. It was like a wind gust came along, the baggie flew off. So we got some feedback on social media about, oh my goodness, we can't believe that officer was littering. And it's like, really? The officer's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to build community relationships here. He's giving somebody a break to demonstrate that we don't just arrest everybody. We do give breaks when breaks are called for. And, there's a reason for that. There's a reason that we do give breaks, and it's officer discretion. And then the baggie flies off in the wind gust that came up. And oh my goodness, we can't believe that officer's littering. So what the show didn't show, what didn't depict, was the next day, that same officer was on the show on Saturday night as well. He goes back to that area with a trash bag and gloves up and starts collecting trash on the side of the road for an hour before his shift started, in kind of his own way of self-correcting. And collected a couple of bags of trash and then took them to the dumpster and threw them away from the roadside. So, he made his amends and somewhat of a reaction on the social media side of that. So, sorry, got a little sidetracked on telling stories there. Yeah, yeah. I think the officer did that. This is one of our officers that was pretty prolific on social media at the time, so I think he did exactly that. And I know the Live PD crew was with him when they did that. I don't know that it actually made the show, but I think he did some social media on his own Twitter feed there. Yeah, it was good on him. Good on that officer to do that. Yeah, so in 1990, this is kind of unique. We had a local media person. She's now legendary here in the area, and she still serves the local media. Her name is Ruth Ann Gordon, and she was doing media training for law enforcement in the 90s, and she'd do a 2-day seminar, and just for new public information officers. And the whole concept of being a PIO with an agency was kind of new then, so she was really on the cutting edge of training police officers who were going to be agency PIOs. So that was my first exposure to that, and what a brilliant move on her part. Because in addition to providing the training for law enforcement agencies, what else is she doing? She's creating resources for her storytelling, for every officer, every agency that she trained. She's getting to know them, and she's developing she's source developing herself at the same time that she's providing relevant media training for police officers. Most cops back then were maybe fairly good at their profession, but the whole public information officer concept was pretty new then in the 90s. And so we truly wanted to embrace that part of it and be a part of telling our story, and wanted to learn more about how to do that. And of course, back then there was no social media. It was, again, it was print, radio, and television. That was pretty much it. So to see some of those changes and some of those platforms come up, like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and other media platforms, YouTube, and other ways of being able to tell our story, I think progressive agencies have really embraced those. And now where we're at, video is king. Doing things like this, podcasts, it's a great way to get your messaging out there and help the public understand our why. Who we are, what we are, why we are, and should truly understand the meaning and the investment of how law enforcement works in America, and how policing works in America. Correct. Yeah, so in my retirement, so I'm doing some side work, some side hustle work. I developed a good credibility, a good knowledge base as far as doing dignitary protection, executive protection, celebrity protection. I've done quite a bit of that over the years. I've done work for several mayors. Protection work like that, close protection. I've had the good fortune to work for some of the most well-known and wealthy people in the world. And it's very much a word of mouth, a very small society there of professionals, of true professionals within that area. And pretty much everybody knows everybody. And I'm continuing to do some consulting and some contract work within media. This is All-Star weekend here in Indianapolis, so I have a lot of work lined up with NBA All-Star game related events here in Indianapolis. And we'll continue on doing that. Otherwise, taking time for myself, reconnecting with loved ones that maybe haven't had a chance to reconnect with, or to connect with as much as I would have liked as an invested professional for 40 years in law enforcement. So I'm staying plenty busy. Kind of wonder, when did I find time to work? But I think it's important also, you work all these years, for me 40 years total, and you want to enjoy the latter parts of it. I'm 60 years old, and I intend on living a very full, robust life on the other side of law enforcement here. So still staying involved, obviously, but when it's time. And when I was appointed chief in January of 22, our mayor that we had at the time, Steve Collier, was just one of the best mayors I've worked for, in addition to my own dad. And he was just the absolute best mayor, and public safety in his heart, but he also just offered tremendous support and opportunity. But the best thing that he didn't micromanage. He let the police chief be the police chief, the fire chief be the fire chief, and he did mayor stuff. And he would always say, smart enough to surround himself with good people. I think any good leader can say that, be smart enough to surround yourself with good people. I certainly did that as chief. I had a deputy chief who is now our chief, and who's a lot better and a lot smarter than me, and really our entire staff, top to bottom. I always viewed it this way. I never said my department. I never said the officers that work for me. No, I work for them. That's the way it works. Well, I tried. My heart was in it, and I cared deeply. So nobody's perfect, but looking back on a 40-year career, are there things you do differently? Yeah, probably. But are things that you regret? No. Man, I had the opportunity to accomplish everything I set out to accomplish, and then some things that I didn't know I wanted to do, that I had the opportunity to do. So I couldn't have more career fulfillment. And being a part of telling the story of our agency, whether it was Frankfort Police, Lawrence Police, or whoever it might be, was an absolute honor. And I think if I had one piece of advice, invest in relationships. If I may share something we do kind of unique here in the Indianapolis area, we have a quarterly meeting with local public safety law enforcement representatives, public information officers, media chiefs, and all that, and local media representatives. It's open to any media representatives who want to come. We call it MISO meetings, Media and Emergency Services Organization. It's not like a 501 or anything, but it's organized by the state police, by the Indiana State Police, and quarterly local media media and public safety, public information officers sit down and talk. And I know it has nothing to do, everybody maintains their ethics and everything, but if there are issues that are coming up, if there are things that occurred like in a major event or a major scene or something that can be worked out, that's the time to do it. And that way, when any agency has a major incident, there are always lessons to be learned from that. Where's the media staging area going to be? What went well? What didn't go well? And we all have the desire to improve the community and to tell the story about what's occurring. And so sitting down and talking about that, and you talk to other law enforcement agencies across the country, and they're like, you guys do that? You guys actually meet with the media and talk to them, and yeah, we do. And it works out great for everybody. It's not a time to pitch stories. It's not a time to talk about story development or anything like that. It truly is a behind the scenes way to make sure that everything runs smoothly and that you invest in those relationships. You sit down, you have lunch, you get to know people on a personal basis. And it's such a key. I would make it a point on a regular basis also to visit newsrooms around the area. Just arrange to go and visit the newsroom during the daytime, at night, on the morning shows. And you're not necessarily there to be a guest on the show or anything. You're just there to invest in relationships and to get to know and to be known. And I think those are some keys to success when it comes to being a media relations person, a public information officer. Yeah, what a great thought. Having a whole discussion about transparency, something's been on my mind on and off over the years. You hear a lot of political people talking about, oh, we want to be transparent. And you hear a lot of law enforcement agencies talk about transparency. So can we talk about that for a second? You down with that? So, we fully embrace the idea of transparency, and I get that. But just in my opinion, and you tell me if you're different. I know our listeners, your listeners will weigh in on this also. But it's an interesting discussion to bring up because, in my mind, the term transparency is a somewhat of a subjective term and can mean something different to every person that you talk to. How do you define transparency? And in my mind, sometimes as law enforcement agencies and as either leaders, as a chief or a deputy chief or a media person, we talk about transparency. And then what's the first thing that happens when a major incident occurs? Well, we can't discuss the details of the case because it remains under investigation. Well, one minute you're talking about transparency, and then the next minute you're saying we can't discuss that because the matter remains under investigation. In my respectful opinion, it might be, and I would share with the audience here, it might be better to talk about authenticity as opposed to transparency, and to help educate the public about whatever process might exist in your area. Let's use the example of an officer-involved shooting. There can be some controversy that surrounds officer-involved shootings, right? Fair. But I think explaining the process, the investigative process, and helping educate the public about the process can be something that can be very beneficial. And it's not a matter of the police covering things up or not wanting to talk about what happened. We need to protect the integrity of the investigation and helping people understand that in an officer-involved shooting, there are two parallel investigations that are going to occur. There's the internal investigation. Did the officers follow the rules and the guidelines set forth by the department? And then the criminal investigation, the legal investigation, did the officers comply with established local, state, and federal laws? So I think helping educate folks about how that process works in an authentic way can be as much of a benefit as talking about transparency. My concern there is sometimes when we talk about transparency and that somewhat subjective term, that people arrive at a conclusion that may not necessarily be the case. And then when we're the people who are out there, the chief, the deputy chief, the media relations chief, whoever it may be, is saying, well, we can't talk about this because the case remains under investigation, it just creates the circumstances where people could say, you're hiding something. And I think that's not good for any of us because, no, we're not hiding anything. Eventually, frequently, certainly here in the state of Indiana and in Marion County, every officer-involved shooting like that by law, by local ordinance, is going to be reviewed by a grand jury. So there is going to be civilian oversight, to use that term, but that process, by its very nature, by law, has to be done behind closed doors and where the citizens can work. The citizens are reviewing that. A jury of peers can review all of the information and make a determination as to whether probable cause exists for a criminal charge to occur. And so protecting the integrity of that process is not just to the benefit of the agency or the officers involved, it's to the benefit of everybody involved. So I think maybe being more authentic about the explanation of those processes, whatever they might be in a particular area, whether it's the Chicago area, or I know you have a nationwide audience here, so whatever that process might be in particular jurisdictions, I think helping educate and inform the public and being authentic about that can, words matter. And when we overuse terms like transparency, as honorable as the intention is with people who are using that term, I would suggest that might be somewhat of an overused term in today's day and age. And we may be doing ourselves more of a disservice by overusing that term than anything. I don't know. Just something's been on my mind for a while. Right. Right. Absolutely. There are competing aspects there, and I think some of this for me comes from my background as a detective. I was a detective for years, working cases, everything from drug cases to violent crime, and I knew what I wanted as a detective, and I just think that I think transparency is important. I think it's well intended. This is not a criticism. This is just an observation. But I do think we do sometimes may do ourselves a bit of a disservice. We talk so much about transparency, and yeah, I agree. We need to be transparent. But the overuse of that term, and I think we could use better terms, better words, such as authenticity and education when it comes to explaining how processes work and how we have to work within the framework of the law. And I think that's something that media relations people, PIOs, can certainly be a part of. Agency heads, chiefs, superintendents, deputy chiefs, people telling the story. And I think media can certainly help with that also, and understanding how and why media works. But we also have never had better platforms, better opportunities as an agency to be a part of telling our own story and harnessing that. We've never had greater opportunity in leveraging those platforms than we do now. Sure. Sure. Well, and I think a lot of that depends on the legal infrastructure that you have. Back in 2016, the Indiana State Legislature passed a body-worn camera law here in the state of Indiana. So it kind of took the some of the policy making decisions away from the local agencies and gave us a common infrastructure to work with across the state. And then each agency could develop its own policy based on that, but it certainly provided a common infrastructure to be used there. Interestingly, and with some agencies, and this applies here in Indiana, there's also a competing law that indicates that matters of criminal evidence, such as a body-worn camera recording and a potentially criminal reviewable incident, incident is not releasable to the public. It has to be preserved as evidence and cannot be released to the public. So, there's some agencies that make the choice to go ahead and do some of those critical incident videos. I'm not debating the efficacy of those, and I understand the reason why agencies make that decision, but there's also the state law and the trial procedural rules that say that technically that's against the rules. It's against the law, if you will, not necessarily a criminal law, but it's against the established rules of evidence when it comes to releasing items of evidence in public. As for instance, as an agency, we made the decision, during my tenure anyway, that we did not show evidence like we'd make a big drug bust. We would not put on the Facebook page, here's the 300 pounds of weed that we just seized and the 6 guns. We talk about that, but we wouldn't put the pictures out there because those are considered matters of criminal evidence. A reason we did that was so that we could have consistency throughout. Some of the agencies that put those items of evidence out there, and then when they do have a critical incident, they say, well, we can't release the evidence there because it's against the rules. Well, you did it in all these other circumstances. Why are you not doing it now? What are you trying to hide? So I think as long as an agency develops consistency within its decision-making like that, policy, common practice, law, however that consistency is developed, as long as they do consistency, I think, whether the media likes it or not, I think they can at least get along with the public and represented by the media. I think they can at least understand it and say, well, they'll at least be consistent with that. It's a very wide-ranging topical conversation there, probably for another completely separate podcast. But I would love to do that. I'd love to be a part of that. All right, let's do it. Texting or talking, man, a little of both, but I kind of like the texting part of it, although understanding the limitations of digital communication. You don't have tone and inflection in digital communication. But yeah, I'm a chocoholic. The results are obvious, right? But yeah, I'm a chocolate guy for sure. 40 years of public safety and law enforcement, I never developed acquired a taste for coffee. I never did. So hot chocolate is my thing, but I'm also a bit of sweet tea guy. I'm the guy who did drank whatever Coke or whatever for years. Thought I was going to be all healthy by switching over to sweet tea, of which I was drinking a gallon a day, and then started developing kidney stones, which was just a true joy. And so I had to switch off of sweet tea and go to the water program. But coffee or tea? Tea for sure. Adult drink of choice. I'm not really a big drinker. I haven't been for a while, but I do like a nice sweet wine, like a Moscato or an ice wine. I'm not really a hard liquor person. Never developed a taste for that. But so I guess I would have to say a nice sweet Moscato or like an ice wine when it comes to that. And of course, I was stationed in Europe, in Germany, in the military, in the army in the 80s. So did a few mustache dunks into the beer steins. And then also because that was just part of the rite of passage of being stationed in Germany. So there you go. I was thinking about this, and so I'm going to be that guy. We're talking about superpower. We talk about like DC Comics type people, or are we just talking about any kind of a superpower you could come up with? Wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty wide ranging, but all right, I'm going to go global here. To have the ability to be able to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, would just be magnificent, right? What a terrible set of circumstances going on there in the Middle East right now, and the right to defense, and it's just a long-standing conflict over there, and I don't pretend to know all the answers, but if I had one superpower, the ability to be able to resolve that, and everybody to be able to worship in the way they want to worship, who they want to worship, and how they want to do it, where they want to do it, like we do for the most part enjoy here in the United States, and resolve that conflict, that would be magnificent. Oh, beg for forgiveness all day long. Audacity, right? Israel, when I was stationed overseas, I had the opportunity to travel everywhere. I'm glad I took it. Greece, Italy, Spain. This is before the wall came down, so couldn't travel to the Eastern Bloc countries as they existed then. But I had the opportunity to literally travel everywhere. The only place I didn't make it to that I regret is Israel, and I would love to have visited the Holy Land there. Did I lose you? Guilty pleasure food. Again, I'm a chocolate guy, so good chocolate pie, dark chocolate cake, things like that. Well, again, the results speak for themselves, but yeah, I'm totally a chocolate guy, so I'd have to say, yeah, that's definitely a guilty pleasure. Patton. Yeah, yeah, yeah. My secondary to that would be Reagan, probably, but yeah, Patton would have to be it would have to be top. Yeah, right. How about that? Right? Yeah, just thank you for having me on the show, on the podcast here, and connect anytime. And always enjoy connecting with people. I'm on LinkedIn. I do not have a website right now. I'm kind of working on that, but I can be found on LinkedIn pretty readily. And always enjoy connecting with people across the country. And I'm all about investing in relationships, developing, maintaining, investing in relationships. That's how I found the PIO podcast here is through LinkedIn. So leveraging those platforms, and I do have a LinkedIn presence. I'm working on a web presence right now. That's still a work in progress. So we'll continue working on that. I don't think so. And let's think about those future shows. I love the idea of having several guests on and kind of talking about that whole transparency concept. Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have and something to be very interesting to the other PIOs, the other media relations folks out there, and it really sparked that conversation. Did all that with intent, and I think it's something that's worthwhile for us to talk about. As well intended as it is, I want to clarify that. I'm not being a critic or saying that the whole transparency thing isn't important and isn't a critical topic to discuss, but I think how we do it is just as important. So, and how we continue to evolve and to continue to invest in that and define it. Yeah, and I've literally traveled across the country doing that kind of work. So we're not limited to Indiana or Indianapolis doing that. And yeah, so and have a network of people around the country that I've worked with, had a good opportunity to work with, and it's a pleasure to stay in this space also in the media relations, public information officer space, invested in relationships there across the country as well, not just locally but across the country. So folks can connect anytime. Very readily located on LinkedIn, and look forward to connecting with anybody who'd like to connect. Honored to do so. Thank you. Have a good day.